All right, so in today's class, we're going to cover two topics. This is the introductory session to business analysis, and this is your first session. So we'll cover and talk about IT projects and business analysis. We'll briefly introduce who's involved, what the process is, how is a project converted from like a concept to its end product, so to speak. And secondly, we'll talk about object-oriented analysis and design. It started out as a technical concept, but there's a lot that a business analyst can learn from and apply onto their job, which would give us a lot of efficiency as to how we get the job done. So we'll touch upon some object-oriented concepts as well. To begin with, IT project and who's involved, like who are the key people involved in a successful IT project, and how is it that we interact with them as a business analyst? Well, how does our responsibility extend to each of these areas of people that we'll work with? So firstly, just to get the basics, I guess from your experience, it might be a refresher, but just to touch upon what is a project. A project is something where it is a temporary time-bound endeavor, right? So you have a specific start, you have a specific end, and you have a goal to reach towards that, going from point A to point B. And how you get that done, right? I mean, you can really spend a lot of money and really get fancy with it. Or you might have to work with limited money, which is for the most part the case for any large company or small company, right? Either way, they don't want to spend too much on a project so that it takes away their attention from several other things that they could potentially be doing, right? So we are always working with limited time, limited money, and limited resources. So nothing is unlimited. And these are the three kind of things that define how a project is executed. For example, if you have limited time, then you'll have to throw in more resources and more money potentially to meet that timeline. And if you are running short of resources, then you'll have to expend more money getting expert resources, for example, right? So one of these, take away one of these, and then the other become streamers. So you have to be a bit cautious about efficiently managing these three things. And any business analyst has, to some extent, some sort of a project management related work that they'll be executing throughout their job, because they have different stakeholders that they're dealing with and different deliverables that you'll need to achieve to keep them happy. So in a sense, you have to manage your own work and also coordinate others with each other, which means as a BA, you are going to have some level of project management related experience that you'll garner. And a quick note, when we say software or system project, we might use that term interchangeably, but essentially, as you know, business analysis has two flavors to it. One is business process analyst, which is primarily looking at the business process of a company and then trying to come up with a more efficient process, right? That is, it doesn't have to be IT. It can be completely non-IT. However, in our course, we are going to be focused more so on IT business analyst. So we are going to be very focused on that area of business analysis. And hence, if we say project, it's an IT project. If we say system, it is an IT system, because we are all trying to get a job in IT and get that frame of mind. So if we might use those terms interchangeably, quick note on that. Now, who are the primary people who we'll be dealing with, right? First, before even we get there, let's talk about sponsor, customer, and user, right? So let's say I have a company and I'm buying these mobile phones for all my employees. I want them to all have the same experience, and I want them to have like a work-related app and everything on their phone so that they have the best experience to support my company's goal. So I might be holding the purse string, so I'm the business sponsor. So I decide whether or not I have the capacity and ability to spend on those mobile phones for all my employees. Secondly, I have the customer as in my IT department maybe will drive this particular project of buying all these cell phones because I'm holding them responsible to ensure it's the right technology and it suits the needs of the apps that we're going to use. So I'm holding them accountable to ensure that it's the right fit. So the customer, in terms of whoever the company we're dealing with, right? So the customer is my IT team, and whoever is providing services is going to be AT&T or Verizon or whoever, right? They are the service provider. So from the service provider's angle, I'm the stakeholder. My IT team is the customer, and my employees who will end up using the system are end users, consumers, right? All right, and then the end customers are the folks that end up using that phone. So now think about you as a business analyst being the service provider, or rather, the business analyst who is the face of the IT team that is providing a service to the stakeholder, the end user, and the customer, right? So the customer is typically someone who's a representative of the entire user base and someone who knows a little bit more information about what would be the right fit for that organization. So we as business analysts, we deal directly with end users to a certain extent because you want them to use the software and then figure out if it's usable for them and whatnot. We'll deal a lot with the customer or whoever is representing the users, right? You'll have a user group that is giving you feedback about what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, what would work, what wouldn't work, what are the policies, what are the procedures, what are the difficulties that they face in today's world, and things like that. And we have some interaction with the other stakeholders, such as the sponsor and anyone else who will be affected by the software that you're using. Maybe this system speaks to another system. They are another stakeholder of yours. Now, coming back to the slide, business sponsor we spoke about. And from a service provider angle, whoever is supporting the solution. So you as a business analyst will report to someone called a business architect. And someone who's a developer, they'll report to a solutions architect. So from a business angle, from a requirements angle, business analyst is the primary person that supports the needs of what needs to be happen, when it needs to be delivered. And the BA and the business architect together represent the business team. And on the other side, you have the developers and then the solution architect who create the software solution, right? So it's obvious how we interact as a business analyst to these different groups. Next comes testing. So once the product is built, testing is, of course, a very crucial and critical, your last guard sort of a role wherein we have to make sure that whatever was intended as a solution is being delivered by the testing team. And we are, of course, interacting with the end users who will provide feedback on what your system does and other um, suggestions that they have. And you'll also be interacting with them in terms of conducting UATs, user acceptance testing, which means it's been tested and delivered, but hey, this might be useful if you can combine these two screens here. And this is information that I use in conjunction with each other all the time. So can we place this data field into this screen, things like that. So they'll have some usability related suggestions to make their daily lives much easier for them. Lastly, we have subject matter experts, which is kind of like the customer that we spoke about, the customer role that we spoke about, the IT department, who has a lot more information than your end customer, end user might have. So they have additional knowledge about what they do today, what is the vision into the future, what are the policies and procedures. So this will probably be a select group of people who form a subset of your entire user base, who can give you expert opinion on how to go about a certain direction. So that way you're not having to always survey hundreds of people to get one answer. Sometimes you do that as well. That is one of the elicitation skills that we will learn about as a BA. But you can't practically survey hundreds of people for every small nitty-gritty and every small decision. So for that reason, you will have a select group of people or one person that is your go-to person in case you have any questions on how you would like something implemented or how to build something, or if you have a decision on whether should we go for option A or option B, how exactly we go about it. So that will be your subject matter expert group. And a couple of you spoke about the agile world and how business analysis fits in there. So in the agile world, the subject matter expert is called product owner. So they are the ones who own the product, they know the product in and out, they know what the company strategy is for a future goal and what we need to achieve to get there. So product owner and subject matter expert are kind of synonymous in a non-agile and agile world example. Then we have us as business analysts, right? So we liaise in and orchestrate everything between these different counterparts that we spoke about, from the development team, testing team who represent technology. We speak with the sponsor, we speak with the other stakeholders that might be impacted by the system. So we form a very central role, and information that needs to pass between these groups seamlessly, it's our responsibility. And one key thing is we need to extract the information from the users, extract the needs from the users. Oftentimes in job descriptions, I see, oh, a business analyst gathers requirements, gathers as if they are just laying around, and then you just gather them, pile them up, organize them, and then put it together, right? Not as easy in the practical world. So that's why the word elicit, we elicit requirements, is interesting, because elicit means you're extracting it out of them. Because sometimes they may not explain the problem statement well enough, but they'll jump into the solution. You will see that all the time. Most people, we kind of think about the fix, and we get into that mode of, okay, this is how I would like to be implemented. That's not the same as, this is my problem. What are the different ways your development team can fix that problem? So understanding the business need from the perspective of defining the problem statement is going to be one of the biggest challenges as a business analyst, especially if you're starting out. So again, we should not be stuck in trying to invent the solution ourselves. Forget about the end customers, that they don't do this all the time. We ourselves sometimes can start talking to developers about, hey, this is the solution for this particular feature. We should not talk about the solution. We do not talk about how it is implemented. We only focus on what the business problem is and allow the reins of the developers to figure out the best way to achieve that. And then allow the software team to figure out a way to solve that problem. It's their responsibility. And one quick note here about the acronym SMART, right? So your requirements, when we define them, it is intended to be specific, as in you don't want to mix up two things. You want requirements to be independent of each other, which means if one requirement changes, only one area is what you're updating, not multiple areas. It shouldn't be spread across. So it has to be specific, measurable. Measurable as in you have to find a way to test it, right? You have to clearly understand if the solution meets the requirements defined. So it has to be measurable and testable. Achievable. Of course, you can write anything, but again, is it achievable? Is it practical? That's where involving a development team and ensuring the practicality of your approach is important. Next is realistic. Okay, it is practical, but again, is it realistically possible given the constraints that we spoke about, money and time and resource constraint? Is it still possible to achieve for your project? Because sometimes you might have a great idea that you can't shoot down, but you might have to negotiate with your users and say, you know what, we'll put it on the parking lot and then we'll revisit it. We'll certainly have an opportunity to address it at a future time, because we need to meet this deadline. We have to deliver something on January 17th. So let us figure it out for the next release, maybe 6 months down the line. I don't want to completely ignore the idea, but at the same time, I don't want to do some band-aid which will, not give you exactly what you're asking for. Let's invest more time into this because this is a great idea. So you might have to come up with some negotiation to achieve that realistic picture. And then lastly, traceable. What does traceable mean? Any requirement should have a root to it, why you're building that requirement. So if you write a requirement, you always have to question yourself, am I within the bounds of what was discussed and committed to the users. Because oftentimes you'll end up facing this difficulty with the customers, as in you're trying to implement something, and the borders are always usually a bit tricky, right? They'll try to extend the borders and then try to get something more that was not initially committed or budgeted for. So for example, you might be developing a system where you're doing a payroll system, right? So what you're committing to is the payroll system. But if you look at it, the timekeeping system is kind of on the borderlines, right? Because there might be another timekeeping system, and along with the payroll system, they might say, oh, by the way, can you also update the timekeeping system to this because it's related and whatnot. So again, you have to always question yourself, what is the root of this requirement? Does it fit well within the bounds of what was committed to deliver? Because one of the things about BAs is we are customer advocates and we have to always support the customers, but you also have to keep in mind that we are also critical in the success of the project, because you're talking to the developers, you're talking to the testers, and you're also representing them to the customers. So if you keep a timeline and if you don't meet it, that doesn't look good on your team either. So if a requirement is being made, requested, right, you always have to question yourself, okay, you know what, am I adding unnecessary burden to my development team by committing to this requirement? Does this fit more of things I have to do later, or requests that have come in, documented, and then figure out when it needs to be done, rather than accepting it and then fully vesting my team into developing it? That's an important question for you to ask yourself. Okay. At this point, any questions? I can open up the floor for questions. So please go ahead. You guys are on mute. So either it's going great or you're dumbfounded and have nothing to ask.
Yeah, I really don't have any questions as of now. It seems like the flow is explained very well, the process, how it happens, and what is, how it's done and stuff like that. So,
all right, next we'll talk about software development lifecycle. This is the mechanism of how software is implemented. So initially, when the software industry kind of started getting incarnated, I want to say in the 70s, we didn't really know how to build software. We knew there was some sort of a gap and that needed to be filled. So how exactly did we realize there was a gap? Okay, so with the industrial world, if you have to do the same thing, you have to repeat over and over again. You simply repeat over and over again. There's no going around it. But then imagine if you have to write like something simple. You have 10,000 customers and you have to send an invoice to them every month, and you have to write a check manually, you have to put the address manually, you have to put a stamp manually and insert 10,000 sheets and then send it out. Even if you had the luxury of a department, I mean, this day and age, that might sound ridiculous, but then imagine in the 70s, right? You had no idea how to do it, but there had to be a better way, right? So you had to come up with other mechanisms of how you could automate this. So example, they might have made a list, and then instead of rewriting every time, they might have found a way to use carbon paper, right? The good old carbon paper. So they might have put carbon paper and then written down once, so that you have at least, okay, you know what, write it once, you're good for 5 times. That's one level of automation. And up until the point of where we've gotten today, right? Imagine just a click of a button and the system is expected to do everything precisely on a timely basis with minimum human intervention, right? So if you can imagine, okay, we knew that we had to do something, and most times requirements are born out of, okay, this seems too manual. How exactly can we automate it? Especially for an IT business analyst, right? That is the most likely scenario where a project begins is, okay, this seems ridiculously manual. How can we automate it? That's where it all starts. And then once you have a system, now you want more. Okay, how can we make this more efficient? This thing that I'm doing takes me 50 minutes. This is just getting ridiculous. How can we make it happen in 5 minutes? How can we simplify the things in the background, or make multiple systems talk to each other so that I'm not inputting the same information here, here, and here. There are several examples you might be able to think of, but I'm trying to keep it generic because the problems are generic as well. So it starts out as how can we automate? Then it gets into how can we make it better? And then that never stops, right? We always want to make things more efficient within the money that we have and whatnot. So when we started off, we had no idea how to build software. So our examples all came from the construction field. Okay, how do you construct something? Because that is what Industrial Revolution taught us, that you could do construction at an amazing pace as long as you figured out the order of doing things and how to do each thing precisely, right? So you have order and then the technique strategy within each thing. So if I'm building a home, I probably lay out the foundation and whatnot. But then after that, level after level, it's the same exact process. Like it's a repeatable process. I first have my frames for the wall, then I'll put the drywall up, then before the drywall, I'll have to do the plumbing and electrical and the basic work, right? So that's all hidden behind the walls. Then I'll put the drywall up. Then I'll have the flooring done. Then I'll have the plumbing and wiring guys come back again and then finish up that work, right? And then I'll have painting and other things. So it's kind of a methodical one after the other process. So we thought, okay, it must be the same. So we'll come up with a process wherein it's one after the other. There's distinct things to do. You do the next thing after this thing is done so that you're not interrupting this other person. So as you can see on the screen, so it started off with planning. Let's first figure out what exactly we are doing, right? Then let's get into programming it, right? Figuring out how exactly it should. I'm sorry. Then you get into um, programming it and then implementing the solution, right? Implementing what you understand. Then you document it, then test it, then deploy it, meaning make it available to the customers, and then maintain the software. On a high level, this sounds reasonable, right? I mean, how complex can it get? But can you spot what one of the key problems here is? Each of you can give me some inputs on where do you sense a problem with this seemingly straightforward approach?
I see something missing between step 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Because from gathering information, I don't know how you can directly go to implementation.
Okay, so not enough is vested there. It seems like there's something missing. Okay.
Right.
All right. Any other thoughts?
So we have only talked about step 1, 2, 3 so far, right?
Well, test 4 is testing it out, and then test 5 is deploying it, which means making it available, and then maintaining it as problems come up, you fix the bugs and whatnot, and then send it back. So essentially, it's just a methodical 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 process. That's what SDLC prescribes.
Also, this is Regina, maybe adding on to what she said on planning and implementation. When you gather requirements, isn't there some sort of process that is required for me to know, since I'm not an expert in programming, to know that if this is doable or not?
Right. Okay. All right. To some extent, you have to account for that in the planning stage, at least based on what SDLC tells us, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yes. You have to do a lot of forward thinking, almost predict what can go wrong, right?
Right.
Correct. That's a good point. Okay. Any other points to add? All right. Yeah. Oh, so your point is, why don't we just test everything, make sure everything is done, and then do the documentation?
Right? Yeah, I mean, that's
okay,
what I would think.
Fair enough. Very fair enough. All right. So based on what you guys have said, that is exactly why we went from SDLC to Agile. So number one problem, so to speak, is you're just counting too much on the planning stage, right? Like you're trying to get all this done right when you're planning. So which means you have to be precise in terms of expecting all the problems that might come your way. If you miss a problem, then that's it, correct? You are banking too much on that planning stage that you're understanding every little problem precisely, because you're not coming back to planning, you're not coming back to documenting. It's not like a circle that feeds on each other. It's like a 1 2 3 4 5 6, and it happens once. So if you miss something in planning and then you realize at the point of deployment, it's too late, right? Your project has to, I mean, if it's a big issue, then you have to kind of revamp and then start over, correct? So that is why this whole big bang way of trying to do this doesn't really work. It is not very effective. That's the main problem with this 1 2 3 4 5 6 process, is because you only have a single one, a single two, a single three, and so on, right? You're banking too much on understanding the entire project all at once, and there's tons and tons of government projects where millions of money was lost trying to do this big bang approach. Like if you want to build like an entire system that can take a year to build, imagine you have like a couple of months to plan, and then you have to figure out every little thing about that mammoth system in a couple of months, and that's it. If you miss something, you may not even know until it's like really late, until the customer sees it. Because at this point, the earliest your customer sees it is 5 after you've deployed it, made it available to the end user, correct? So that just conceptually sounds like it's not a good idea at all. So then, hello?
Yes.
Hello?
I thought someone spoke up. Any questions?
No, not from me.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. So the key things to do in a waterfall model are analyzing the software, right? Analyzing the software requirements, design, implementation, testing, deployment, and then maintenance. So this is the same structure presented in a slightly different layout, but these are essentially the key pieces in a waterfall methodology. So, and another interesting thing is, you as a business analyst, you'll be really busy in the analysis stage, in the initial stage where you're doing the planning and then understanding part. And then after that, I mean, you're probably burned to death during that period. But then after that, you're not doing much except supporting, minimal support to others. And then similarly, when the designing and developing is going on, the developers are just working full on. Like, it just seems like if it's a years long project, for a couple of months, one of the teams is doing like extreme overnight and burning the midnight oil, and other teams are just waiting on it, right? So again, from a planning perspective, it becomes hard. How can you just hire developers for like 2 months and then tell them, okay, by the way, you're done now, so can you get on to a part-time schedule? Can you like work 2 hours a day? When you're busy, we wanted you 16 18 hours, but then now we only need 2 hours. That's ridiculous as well, right? It doesn't blend well into resource management. It's not like a distributed effort where everyone's patting each other's back. That's where, again, Agile has become a lot more popular in that angle. Before we jumped into Agile, again, we tried a few different things. One of the things is called iterative and incremental model. And this would prescribe that, you know what, just don't do this 1 2 3 4 5 6 all at once, big bang, and then be done with it. Before you identify, before you make the problem statement and then start planning, break down the problem statement into different pieces. So let's say I have a large project that I'm building. I'll break that down into probably 4 sub-projects. Sub-project A, sub-project B, sub-project C, and sub-project D. Now, each of these sub-projects is going to have its own cycle of 1 2 3 4 5 6. So you'll have A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6. Okay, now that we're done with that, now let's do B1, B2, B3, B4, B5, B6, and so on. So that way, you at least learn something from missing in the A cycle, you can at least get caught up in the B cycle. And then that way it's a little bit less pronounced for each team. So each team will be like, okay, you know what, instead of the entire year, 2 years, you're burned to death trying to figure out your role and responsibility. Instead, we split it into 4, right? So A will happen in 3 months, B will happen in 3 months, and so on. So within A, you have a cycle where like a week, week and a half, each team is heavily pronounced, but at least it's not as bad as the previous model. So it gives a little bit of breathing space from a resource allocation perspective. That is the iterative and incremental model. So we wanted to quickly touch upon that. And Agile touches upon this principle as well, kind of the feedback loop. You learn something and then you implement it in the next time. Now, what's interesting here is, let's compare it to building a house, right? So let's say our A, B, C, and D are 4 different subsystems that we are building. Let's compare it to 4 different floors. So you mess up something in floor 1, right? At least you can fix the layout to a certain extent in the second floor. And then you again, you don't like where the bedroom faces all of a sudden. Now you'll have to make a fix which is possible, whatever is possible, and apply it on level 3. So in conceptually, this seems better than the previous one, but still there might be some opportunities for improvement. So multiple different methods were proposed, and then Agile was and is still relevant in a lot of organizations as one of the better methodologies to suit software development, because it broke down a lot of myths in software development and kind of challenged the way people think about it. So it's opened up the concept of IT development, in that it's not very constrained, it's not very strict in what it defines or how you get things done. It only gives you a concept of what is a good best practice, Agile I'm talking about. And then if you apply a framework on top of it, Scrum would be an example of a framework. So Agile is a concept, as in it lays out the principles on best practices of building software. For example, it says, okay, never count on getting all the requirements done together right at the get-go. Okay, that's the number one premise of waterfall model. And then it says, okay, do like extremely small cycles. Instead of doing like subsystems, break it down even further. Consider what you can do in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but it has to be that short. So within a week, and 2 weeks are not very common. I mean, I'm sorry, 1 week is not very common. To pull off like a 1 week sprint, your team has to be like extremely capable and top of things. So they have to be very, very used with the Agile structure. And sometimes the project itself may not blend well with a 1 week sprint, because there's only so much you can do. And then you might have a certain feature that drags on to 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Now I started using keywords such as sprint. So let me take a step back and first give you a glossary of everything that we see on the screen. So the first thing is, let's start with the working software. Let's start from the right side. Okay. So let's start on the right side. Working increment of software. So what exactly is that? That's what we are trying to achieving, right? It doesn't say the entire software. It's not the entire program either. It's working piece of software that is delivered in a small chunk. So it's a very small piece in the overall grand scheme of things. So to deliver that one working piece of software, what do we do? How do we have to build it up? Now let's go to this end. Long-term product backlog, right? So this product backlog is my wish list. What are the things I would like to do? What are the things I would like to see my system do? And each one is laid out in its priority order. The most important thing is on the top. Also, the most foundational piece that needs to be done before even you get anywhere again resides on the top. For example, if you take a system, you might first want to build who are the different user types and what are the different entitlements, abilities they will have once they log in, that sort of a thing, right? So your first items are going to be foundational pieces, and then it's going to be the most important pieces by decreasing order of priority, right? So this is a prioritized backlog that is key. So this is your wish list. So think about things that you want to see working in your software, right? Now, the development team looks at this list and says, okay, you know what? How can we best achieve this within the team size that we have and the timeline of the project? Should we go with the 1 week sprint or 2 week sprint, or how many weeks sprint? That's where the development team and the organization together find out, okay, for our organization, we want to make 2 week sprints. What does that mean? So that means every 2 weeks, you do this cycle. Remember in our example, waterfall, we thought about doing the entire project in a year. And then we thought about doing in the iterative model, we said, okay, 3 months, we'll do that cycle and then we'll repeat that 4 times, right? So it further reduces one cycle in that reference is 3 months. Now that instead of the 3 months, you're repeating that cycle every 2 weeks. So imagine in a year, you're going to have 26 sprints. So 26 times that you're gathering requirements, 26 times that you're developing something, 26 times that you're testing something, 26 times, then this is the most important thing, that your customer looks at that product and tell us whether they love it, hate it, or if it's ugly or neat, right? So that 26 times that you have an opportunity with the customer and the 26 times that you have the opportunity to improvise on the next sprint, do better than what you did on the last sprint, that is bottom line success or a key factor within Agile, that, or I'd rather say Scrum, because we are kind of blending Agile and Scrum a little bit here. This particular model is what Scrum prescribes. There are other Agile principles like Kanban and other things, but for the most part, Agile is one of the more popular ones. So once you've decided what is your sprint length, right? Your sprint length is 1 to 4 weeks. We know that, we've defined that. Once you know that, okay, so within that 2-week period, how many items can I take from this backlog? Okay, this sprint, I'm confident I'll be able to take 4 items. Let me take those 4 items and then figure out what needs to be done to get those 4 items ready to ship to the customer in this little box. And I use the term ready to ship. What does that mean? So if you need to send a package to someone, let's say a Christmas package to someone, you have to buy the product, you have to gift wrap it, you have to put it in the carton, stick the address label, only then it can be delivered to your USPS or UPS or wherever, right? So getting it ready to go out the door, ready for showcasing to the customer, which means you should not have links that are not working. You should not have any issues when you're navigating around. Everything that was committed should be working independently for that tiny bit of software. So you might do very small progressions, but those progressions should be complete and rounded, finished, well thought out. Nothing should be midway, hanging in the air. You can't say, oh, don't click that button, it's not ready yet. Then remove that button. Or we have some calculation related issues that we are still figuring out. Okay, no, then recall it. Don't even expose it to the customer. So what you're showing the customer is only sparkling, shiny, ready to ship software, right? In the end of the 2 weeks. So to get there, which are the pieces that we are confident about? Which are the product backlog items are we confident about to get to this ready to ship software phase? Make sense? And now what are these vertical lines? We saw these horizontal lines. Now what are these vertical lines? These vertical lines, we can call them sprint backlog and these would be user stories. So what are user stories? Okay, so I have an item here which says let's make up a system. I want to create a system that does my payroll. Okay, so one of the first items is I want to, and let's say we're just abolishing a system that we were using as a third-party system, and we are creating our own. So, and one of the user stories there is every 15 days, I want to run a report of the hours. I want to get the hours from the time tracking system and then compile it and then make it available so that it can be processed at the next level, based on how much we pay them, right? Before we get to how much we pay them, what are the hours work, right? So the first user story is all about that. I'm sorry, the first feature is all about that. Get the hours information into the payroll system so that it can be processed systematically, and do this every 15 days. That's the essence of this first item. Now, to achieve that, what are the different smaller pieces that need to be implemented? The team gets together every time they're about to start a sprint, and this is called a sprint planning meeting. Before they start, they take up the first item. Okay, they take up, and then think of this as a box, right? They take up the first box just conceptually because it's bigger, right? They bigger than your sprint backlog. So they take up the first box, whatever you see a stacked list of boxes, right? You take the first box and it says, okay, this is the payroll item that is intended. Now you open up the box and then you fill that box with index cards. What are these index cards? Each index card is a thing that needs to be done to fulfill the requirements of that box. I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but you get the idea. So let me also add another layer to it. So you open up the box and you see several sheets of paper, like A4 or paper size, letter size sheets, and those sheets describe different user stories. Example, my first user story will be create an interface with the time tracking system so that I have the data available from the source. Now this sounds like a technical story, and it is, but it's more for the developers to figure out how to hook up to this existing timekeeping system. Make sense? Once you hook it up, then you have the information that you need. So that's one piece of it. The next piece of it, generate this payroll information across all departments and compile the departmental breakdown of hours worked in that pay cycle. That might be the second user story. And this is so that you can report to each of these departments. Like, okay, this was your time spent on a yearly, on a payroll cycle basis. And then time can be translated into money, right? So this is aggregating that and putting that into each department. So that's your second sheet of paper. Now, third sheet of paper is compile the information in the format that you need that is easy for payroll calculation. So again, you have what information do you need? How do you need it to be reported? How do you need it to be compiled? That's the third user story. And let's stop there just to keep it simple. So you have this box. You open up the box. You have 3 sheets of paper. You take up the first sheet of paper. And then you start putting sticky notes to it. What are these sticky notes? Okay, to build that first user story, what is that I have to do as a developer? So I would put up blue sticky notes. Just work with me conceptually, right? I would put up blue sticky notes to denote, okay, all the developmental tasks that I have to do. Okay, this is task 1, first sticky. I'm estimating that it'll take like a couple of hours, 2 hours. And then here's my other task I have to do. This might take 1 hour. This is the third task I have to do. This might take 30 minutes. The first thing is I have to talk to the time tracking development team to understand their data structure. That's 2 hours because I have to meet with them, I have to document with them. The next task is build an interface. The third task is do an initial system testing for my own purpose. So these 3 tasks are 2 hours, 4 hours, and then 1 hour, right? I have 3 sticky notes. Then the tester comes in and they say, okay, you know what? I need to test this interface. And probably I just need 1 sticky because it's not too much of a complex test. I have to see what information is at source and ensure that that information is carried over to the payroll system. So here's my sticky, and my estimate for this is 6 hours, right? And you as a BA might have a task. You know what? You might have a task to say, you know what? Once that information is exported, available, double check with the business users to make sure that you have all the information you need to present to them. So that is your little task, and you might allocate 2 hours of your time for that task. So now remember, you have the box, which is the product backlog item, a single product backlog item. You have the sheets of paper, which are user stories, and within each user story, you have these multicolored stickies representing each department's role and work that they have to do. I'll pause right here for any questions. Okay, so we have a plan of action for the first box. Similarly, you pick each box and make your plan for each box. Now, I mentioned as a box because it's a container for these different stories, right? But in a real agile world, you're dealing with stories primarily. So you have story one. What does dev have to do? What does test have to do? What does a B have to do? Does anyone else has any task to do? So what are the things that need to be done to get the ship ready? And then when we say ship ready, what is the technical term for that? It's called definition of done. What would render my item, the first box, right? What would make it done? Definition of done. So every team, every sprint team has an understanding about what does it mean for it to be done? What are the things that need to be squared away? Of course, it has to be tested, right? Things like that. So what are the things that you consider important before it can be considered done? And your business might have a certain need. They'll be like, okay, before you consider it done, I will need you to put together all the screenshots in a Word document and upload it here in this website, in this SharePoint. That is another requirement from your business team. So you as a BA or whoever else is acknowledging taking up that task will have to put a sticky for that one, right? Because that's included in your definition of done. So essentially, you have all your tasks ready. Okay, so now how do we go about executing that task? Okay, that is going to be another challenge altogether. So how do we orchestrate it and make sure that things are done right within the time you have? How exactly can we achieve that? Because 2 weeks is extremely short time. You have a person out sick for like 2-3 days, your entire project for that 2-week period, that shiny working software, that can be compromised. So how exactly do you address it? So that is why within that 4-week period, within that 2-week period, within that 1-week period, whatever, in our example it's 2 weeks, right? Within that 2-week sprint, you have a daily planning meeting every day. And it's not a long 2-hour meeting. It's like a short 15-minute meeting where everyone gets together and they talk about what they did the previous day, what are they going to do today, and then any roadblocks that they have faced. So the reason this is useful, even though it's like really quick, is it gives each team the context of what to expect from the other team. For example, your testers can be like, okay, is this ready for me to test, or you're still working on this? It gives a good opportunity, a mandatory opportunity for people to get on the same page. It's as simple as that, right? And the beauty of Scrum is really in its simplicity. So this is a required meeting. It's not optional. It is one of the ceremonies, as we would call it. And now let's talk about, okay, what is this special thing called ceremonies? We spoke about the sprint planning meeting, right? That is a ceremony because it happens on a repeated basis. It is required from a prescription of Scrum that you conduct that meeting because there is a benefit to be achieved there. So that is an important ceremony. And then you have this daily stand-up. That is an important ceremony. Now let's talk about, okay, you turned your wheels properly and everything is going as expected. Now you're about to end the sprint. You have a couple of days left. At that juncture, you do two things. One, you present it to your customers. You demo it to your customers and get their feedback on what they think. They might be like, lovely. They might be like, it's crap. Worst case, right? Even if they say that this does not meet their needs, you only wasted 2 weeks of time, not 52 weeks. Correct? And it's unlikely that you would have been completely off the track because You've already shared the user stories with them. You have a pretty good handle of what to do and how to do. And this is not the first time they're seeing it. They are kind of um, entertained in that process multiple points, and we'll talk about that separately. But they have a constant view into what is happening, so nothing should surprise them. So mostly our feedback are small little items. Okay, can we change this? Would this look better? Or can we do that about navigation? Small things. So every time someone identifies a small thing, small suggestion, it goes back into this product backlog and its own priority. Something might be really critical, it jumps right on the top. So someone needs to take the responsibility of putting it in the right, stacking the box in the right place. That is extremely important. And that responsibility lies with this person called product owner. Remember, we spoke about subject matter expert, your customer. In our IT phone example, phone system implementation example, the customer was your IT department, right? So that from that department, a single person, a product owner is never a team, it's never a committee, it's a single person. You can have all those committees, meetings, who gets to say what, who has a say, all that is great behind the scenes. But when it comes to managing the product backlog, it's a single person who has to have the ability to say yay or nay, so that you're not running behind 10 people. So anytime feedback comes, we document it and then we put it in the backlog. And where we put it in the backlog is controlled by the product owner. So we might put it in the bottom of the backlog, and then the product owner will then assign it to the right level of priority, right? So that is how the feedback is utilized. Now, the other important ceremony here at this point, when you're almost done, is taking a step back, taking a look back at the 2 week period and say, okay, how did we do in this sprint as a team? And this is for the Scrum team itself. And a Scrum team is usually 7 plus or minus 2 members. So it's about 5 to 9 people is the optimal recommendation. So your Scrum team gathers internally. This is not a customer meeting. This is not a manager kind of bossing around and asking you why this wasn't done or whatever. This is the team by itself. That's why Scrum is called a self-governing team. You do not have a project manager per se in a Scrum environment, technically speaking. I mean, realistically, that's another story, but there is no role called a project manager. There is no role called a boss. The Scrum team is a Scrum team. Every person is a team member. So if you don't deliver something as promised, let's say, out of these 4 boxes that you took up, you only delivered 3 boxes, right? What happened to the 4th box there? That is very important to discuss in that ceremony called sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective. Now, that meeting is, okay, what did we do? What did we do well that we can continue? What did we not do so well that we can improvise? That's the bottom line. And if there are any misses, like let's say we didn't complete an item, why exactly we didn't complete an item? Or if, let's say, starting on the sprint, we thought we'll take up 4 items, but by the time we were done, we had so much time in our hands that we picked up another item. That's great. How did we do that? How did we pull that off, right? So identifying best practices and eliminating inefficiencies is all about that sprint retrospective meeting. And the demo to the customer that we spoke about, that's called sprint review. And one item that is not shown in this chart directly because the timeline, it's not, it can happen anytime during this 2 week period, and that is called grooming meeting. Okay, so grooming meeting is when the product owner definitely, the Scrum team definitely, and any other stakeholders that need to be in there, they participate and they look at each story, and that is where the sheets are made, the user stories are made. So those meetings, you pick up something, right? Okay, this is a new box because it's just a suggestion, right? Nothing exists in there. You take every box that has nothing in there and then figure out, okay, what are the different user stories are needed to achieve that feature. So box 1, okay, this might be like a couple of hours meeting, 2 hours meeting, for example. So initially you might go through each box and think about, okay, which boxes are empty? And now maybe we should make it up that it's a transparent box, right? So look through the transparent boxes and see which sheets are empty. And then first start putting sheets in there. All you'll have is a user story title, a high level of what needs to be done. Then in the next meeting, Once you make sure that, okay, no boxes are empty, then you might get into, okay, let's fill in some of those details. Let's look at the top 10 boxes and make sure that they have all the details needed for the sprint team to pick up, because the sprint team, all they do is look at the top of the backlog, because that's what they'll be working on. So we, in this meeting, there are a few things that we do on a customary basis, right? First thing is make sure that the top 10 boxes are full. The sheets are there, the details are there, meaning the title is there, what the user story is intended to, that is there. And the next concept is called acceptance criteria. So within the box, within the user story, you have a title, right? Nice big font, name of the user
Excuse
story.
me.
Yes.
I have a question. We are talking about the grooming meetings, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So at the grooming meeting, you first go through each of the boxes, make sure none of the boxes are empty, so that at least you have some context in each box, that each box at least has a sheet or as many sheets as needed. Another thing you do is you also make sure the top 10 boxes have full of information ready to be picked up by the Scrum team. So each box can have multiple user stories, and each user story can have multiple acceptance criteria. What is acceptance criteria? Okay, so I have a sheet of paper. The title of that is written in nice big font. And within that title, there are multiple bullet points. Each bullet point says details about what exactly needs to be done. Remember the sticky notes where the developers and testers and BAs put together to ensure what needs to be done to meet your definition of done? This bulleted list is the information needed for 10, right? Because you can't simply have a title and then expect them to know exactly what to do. So we write out in as much detail as we can what are the things that are intended within that title of that user story. So you have the product backlog item. Within that, you have the user story. Within the user story, you have a title, you have the acceptance criteria. And once you have that completely listed and nailed down, it is ready for the developers to pick up. Okay. And this is what primarily happens in the grooming meeting. So you have these discussions. You as a BA might take these discussions back and then write the user stories and then bring it back to the next planning meeting or the grooming meeting. And as you can imagine, it's time boxed. It's 2 hours that you spend every week. So you will maintain some sort of a list of, okay, these are the user stories that we need to review today within the time we have. So let's start with the priority. The ones on the top of the backlog, those are our priority. Then we want to make sure each backlog has some context. Then we have to make sure each user story is getting completed. Each product backlog item is getting completed. So as new items come in, like suggestions from here, remember? Suggestions from the review meeting or suggestions from even people using the software for a few weeks now. They thought about new suggestion. All that is getting piled up in the product backlog, right? So this product backlog is a living, breathing thing, right? It keeps getting updated. It's not like you fix it up once and you're done. So unlike the waterfall methodology, this is kind of completely the opposite. You're expecting changes all the time, which is important, which is common sense almost if you think about it. So this product backlog items constantly have to be reshuffled to make it in the right order, constantly have to be looked at to make sure the high priority items are ready for the sprint team to pick up. And as you can imagine, something came from the feedback last week and suddenly it's on the top of the backlog, right? Again, you have to quickly groom that, make sure you have everything that is needed. If needed, create another grooming meeting because you didn't even expect this new item to come up so much on the top, right? Whatever you have to do to get that ready for the sprint to pick up. Now, here's an interesting question. There's this product backlog items. I have a nice prioritized list. I know that it's a 2-week period. Now, how do I know how many can I pull in into any given sprint, right? Do I guess and just pull in 4 each time? Not really, right? There should be some sort of a method to it. So I like to open up the floor and then ask you guys, what do you think? How do you think that happens? So you have each of these items, and you need to know how much to pull into this 2 weeks sprint, and it's really dynamic. So it's really like only 2 weeks, right? So you can't get to the nitty gritty of how many hours each one will take. I mean, that's like too much exercise to get an approximate, okay, pull as many items as you can into a sprint, right? So without getting into hourly, that one disclaimer I'll give you, without getting into calculating the hours that it will take, how do you estimate what you can pull into a given sprint? And I'd like you guys to answer.
I'm thinking that, that would take some amount of experience to kind of come up with a timeline for something like that, and to pick and choose, what is practically and feasibly possible in given period of time to be completed. Because sometimes, your customer has a priority that, I need this particular part done first, then there has to be some compromise somewhere on their end that they cannot have everything done in 2 weeks period time, And if you don't have any such restriction, then in that case, probably, you could have a quick meeting with your developer team and just ask them what they think that, this particular kind of project would take.
Okay, so by experience, kind of guesstimate is what you're saying.
I would think so.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
My thoughts would be, whatever you're doing, never to lose the focus of the bigger picture of what you want to achieve. And from what I have read around, I always see the BA as the negotiator between the client and the developers. So, like she said, it comes in with experience of how to negotiate both sides, that this is not really important, we can do it later. And also going back to what you said, to elicit the requirements from the clients. Because working with clients, sometimes they don't even know what they want. And they also expect miracles. This is what I've noticed when you work with clients, and then you have to guide them without losing the bigger picture of your project.
Okay, all right. Don't lose a bigger picture while you're looking at these individual ones, okay? So you need to know what you're implementing and what you're pushing on through. Okay, any other thoughts?
Well said. I think maybe I'll just be repeating, but prioritizing is, of course, of importance, and also to know, like, in order for, let's say, A to be done, I'm forgetting the terminology, but there's somewhere where they say, like, especially in construction, to catch up, or there's no lag behind. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. So that there's a seamless process of what's supposed to be done.
Sure. But how much? How do you know about how much? You're talking about what needs to be done, but how do you know how much? How many boxes to pull in?
Well, then that depends on what's our priority at that point in time.
And
I mean, you have the priority already.
I think, it also depends, because like as business analyst, I mean, my whole take on this is, first thing is like, based on your experience. And then second thing is you need to talk to your team. You need to talk to your developers and, have their insight into it, because, you might think, oh, this is just adding a button, how long it could take,
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all I'm saying, that it's teamwork, it's a whole, it's like an ongoing process. So you single-handedly, I guess, cannot decide how long something will take and how much you can pull for the 2 weeks or 4 weeks time frame that you have been given at any given point in time.
Right. It's the team's responsibility. It is a team's responsibility, definitely. So everyone needs to give an input. Now, I took out the obvious answer, like don't go into hours, right? Don't go that specific, right?
Right.
But you need some sort of a time-related measure, time-related guidance, correct?
Right.
So how do you do that without talking about the nitty-gritty of hours, how long each task will take? The problem is the hours come into the picture only when you're writing the stickies, right?
Right.
Can I just
Um,
ask something?
Sure, please.
Okay. Let's say you know that the developer said they'll take 2 days with whatever requirements or whatever they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
But for the developer to do that, they have to ask maybe the database administrator to extract to get that data.
Mhm.
And the data person might also have their time frame,
Right.
which in turn the developer's time is no longer what's practical.
Right, right. I mean, everyone needs to chime in on how long it'll approximately take, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So I'll give you guys how it's generally done in the industry. So sometimes these boxes, right at looking at the box, you'll be like, okay, this is probably like 2 months worth of work. Some boxes you'll be like, okay, this is probably a day's worth of work. Some boxes you can say, okay, this is probably going to be 7 days. I don't know, right? So at that level, you have an idea, like at least number of days, weeks, or months, you'll have an idea. First of all, the ones that have the months have to be now put into multiple boxes. You can't deal with that in one box because in each sprint, you want to be able to complete that box. Make sense?
Right.
So each sprint, you want to be able to complete that sprint. So anything that is like month or anything that is over 2 weeks, because that is what we have selected, right? So anything that is over 2 weeks automatically gets split into multiple boxes, which means most of these or absolutely each of these should take at most probably a week, because you don't want an entire sprint to be on like one product backlog item either. So the maximum an item should be like a few days to a week, not no longer than that, right? So now you know how to split up the boxes. Now you get into this idea of, okay, you know what? Overall, based on the user story, the title, and the acceptance criteria, how many days will this item take? You're not getting into the nitty-gritty of the hours, but as a team, can we all agree, okay, this is probably a 3-day item. This is probably a 5-day item, correct? To that extent, you can get the team's agreement. And when in doubt, you probably have to go with the higher one. And if one person is saying 2 days, another person is saying 7 days, then you have more discussion to do as to why that discrepancy. Is this person, whoever is saying 2 days, is he oversimplifying it? Or if the 7 days person, are they misunderstanding something? Make sense?
Yes.
So
Thank
think
you.
about it in terms of days, right? And in the real world, we don't do days, but substitute days with story points, a concept called story points. A story point is nothing but like it means different things for different companies. There's no set rule that one story point is a day, although that would be an easier way to look at it, right? So in companies, what they do is they would take, okay, you have an 8-hour workday, couple of hours are gone in meetings and whatnot, right? So 6 hours is approximately or 1 day's worth of work you're able to deliver. And a company might say, okay, one story point equal to 1 day. Okay. And then 2 story points is 2 days. That is one way to think about it. But the real Scrum way of looking at it is you will pick up a story that you're very familiar with. Okay. Let's say, interacting with the um, timekeeping system and then pulling that information in here, right? That might be a simple story. So you know that, okay, this is 4 plus 2 plus 6, let's say 12 hours. 12 hours as in 2 days of work, 6 hours plus 6 hours. So this is 2. So for this story, I'm going to call it, it's 2 story points. Makes sense? Now I pick up the next story and I'm like, okay, is this more complex than the previous one that we looked at or less complex? If it's more complex, it has to be at least a 3 or more, right? If it's less complex, it has to be probably 1 or so, something like that. So you take a story and you mark that as whatever story points you want. You can say, okay, this one I'm going to call it a 2. If the next one is simpler than this, then that's a 1. Next one is more complicated, then we'll figure out it is the 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever. This is one way to look at it, so that you pick up a story, you're not thinking hours, but you're thinking days, or you're thinking about it as a relative. Is this more difficult than the previous one, less difficult than the previous one? Got it? Now the next concept is we use Fibonacci numbers typically to do the estimates. What is the Fibonacci series? Anyone?
I don't know.
Anyone knows or recalls?
No.
No.
You may have studied this a while ago somewhere. Okay, Fibonacci series goes like this. So 0, it starts off with 1. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. So you get the next number by adding up the previous 2 numbers. So we started off with 1, right? And then 2. You add 2 and 1, you get 3. That's the next number. You add 3 and 2, you get 5. You get 5 and 3, you get 8. So each next number is the sum of the previous 2 numbers. So I'll say that again. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on. Make sense?
What does it called again?
Fibonacci series. Fibonacchi, something like that. Google will autocorrect it.
Okay.
So like everybody have started forgetting to remember the exact spelling. So it's called Fibonacci series. Okay, so why do we do it as a Fibonacci series? Any thoughts on that?
Well, wherever you have gotten is the result of what you have done before. So
no, in terms of estimating, right? So I'm telling you, okay, if you're putting story points, right, you can only use these numbers and think about the numbers, and then think about how they relate. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. These are the numbers you have to pick to assign story points to each of your sheets. Why do I have to go with this bizarre series of numbers?
I have no idea.
Why can't I just go simple and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 13, up to 13. Why can't I go simple?
No idea.
Any other thoughts? I think the reason is too simple that it's hiding from you. One thing, lesser the options, the better. Okay. So let's say you have small, medium, large, extra large, double extra large, triple extra large, whatever, right? Instead, if you go with numbering them and trying to be too precise, instead of these standard small, medium, large, XL, double XL, triple XL, even triple XL, right? Instead of these 6 sizes, let's say I want to come up with 15 sizes because I want to be more precise. I want to be more fitting. I could do that, but again, it's not very good for the industry, right? Then we have to manage 15 SKUs instead of 6, correct? And then the 6 sizes works, like more or less it works for most people, correct? So one, smaller the options, the easier it is. Otherwise, you'll be fighting about, okay, should this be like a 12 or a 13 or a 10 or 11? See, at that level, right, at that grand scheme of things, if it's more than 8, just bump it into a 13, right? I mean, you don't have to think too much about it, right? The larger it is, you don't know enough. Like it makes sense to fight about and discuss about, okay, is this like a 1, 2, or a 3 or a 5, right? That's something. But to go and figure out, okay, is it A 5 or an 8 or a 13 is kind of easier to think about, right? I mean, when in doubt, bump it up and then move on.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So that's why as you go bigger, the gap between numbers are much higher, correct? So basically, it gives the team an indication. You know what? If it's small enough, manageable enough, then try to be precise. But if it's larger, just call it large and forget about it. And some teams even do the t-shirt sizing in their project. They'll have only like 5 values: extra small, small, medium, large, XL. And that's it, right? They'll just put these on each user story. And then you will have some sort of a computation. You might say, okay, extra small is 1, small is 2, something like that.
Mm.
And then you compute it. So the very first sprint, you probably don't know how much you're going to deliver. So you'll kind of guess. By experience, you'll guess, okay, you know what, I guess we can try about 10 story points. I have a 2-week sprint, and I'm going to keep it as 1 day equal to 1 story point. So I have 10 working days. So I guess I'll take 10 points and then see where that leads us. Okay. And you do the same thing for the next sprint, and then you kind of adjust. Instead of 10, okay, last sprint we did really well. We thought we'll do 10, but we were able to pick up 12. So maybe I'll pick up 12 this time, right? And then the next time you take up 12, you're not able to achieve 12. You're only achieving 11 points in that sprint. So your velocity, in other words, how much you can deliver per sprint as a sprint team is called velocity. And that would be the average of these 3 numbers: 10 plus 12 plus 11 divided by 3, right? So that gives you, like, your average throughput in the last 3 sprints tells you what your potential throughput is in the coming sprint. And the reason we always do an average of the last 3 sprints is, sometimes you have outages, sometimes you have unexpected issues. It kind of more or less evens out. And once you're a mature team, you kind of know, okay, you know what, our output is 15 points. We know that right off the bat when you're planning the sprint. Now, is anyone out during the sprint? Okay, usually do we 15. This time, since this person is out for 4 days, we'll just bump it down to 12 instead of 15. Make sense? So the other key thing that is done in the grooming meeting is estimating them, which would be assigning story points to these, so that when the sprint team starts to plan their sprint, starts to understand what sheets of paper they take on, they'll know exactly how many boxes to take up. Make sense? All right, as a homework for you guys, I would like you to find, let's say, about 4 YouTube videos each that have very good information about Agile. 4 videos. The best videos you can find about Agile and Scrum. Okay, go ahead and send it to me. The second thing I would like you to do is think about, you don't have to think about, okay, go to this website, capterra.com, CAPTERRA. Okay, capterra.com. CAPTERRA. It's a software directory. So pick any software, doesn't matter, something that you're familiar with, any industry that you're familiar with. Pick a software. If your background is in accounting, pick accounting, right? Take a software, look at the software features from that website. And then based on the features that you see, write up 5 user stories, 5 product backlog items. Okay, 5 product backlog items, and at least 3 user stories within each product backlog item. I'll repeat that. You're going to find 4 YouTube videos that are very useful, very insightful in terms of Agile. So just don't give me the top 4 that you see. Take some time. Take some time, figure it out, and then whatever you think is to review 4, you probably need to look at 10. So give me whatever you think are the best resources that you can find. And the real intention here is, of course, to make you a little bit more immersed in that subject. And that's why I spend so much time on this one slide, because it's kind of important, and it's not rocket science either. So instead of just going as a business analyst, going in as an agile business analyst would do you a lot of good. Okay. And then the second one is go to Capterra.com, pick any software, a single software, one tool, and then identify 5 product backlog items, boxes, right? 5 features. And for each feature, try to write at least 3 user stories. And as you do the agile research and Scrum research, you will learn more about what a user story is and how it is constructed and how it is supposed to be titled and all that. Okay. And
So
the
for,
third,
excuse me, so for the 5 product backlog items, we have to write 3 user stories each, right?
Correct.
So for one item, 3 user stories.
Correct. Yes. So you'll have 15 user stories end of it.
Okay.
So another question is, when you say pick a software, is this like a website?
The website that I gave you has tons of softwares listed in there.
Okay. The CAPTTRA.com?
I'll repeat it again. CAPTERRA, Capterra. CAPTERRA.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And the third homework is go to scrum.org, scrum.org, and they have a free user guide on Scrum. Scrum is free for everyone. It's not copyrighted. It's not protected, nothing. It's free for everyone. Download that PDF and then read through it. It will reiterate all that we spoke about, and it's from the creators of Scrum. So, I would like you to have that perspective. I'm a practitioner of Scrum. I have a couple of certifications in Scrum. I have their certification that you'll see on the website, PSM. It's Professional Scrum Master. I also have CSM, Certified Scrum Master, and I also have SAFe for Agilist as well. So I've done a lot of Scrum, and for you guys as beginners, it's one of the easiest things to learn without much of, blocker. There's so much information online. There's no excuse not to learn, sort of a thing.
That's actually interesting that you're saying that. Abigail and I were supposed to take a Scrum Master class next weekend, 26th.
Yeah.
That was our initial plan, to do the 2-day class, but then we decided 2 days, let's start with business analysis first, get it out of the way, then we can move into Scrum Master.
That's logical as well. I started out as a BA and then I got into Scrum Master. Scrum Master is not difficult, but to get a job as a full-time Scrum Master, it's a bit hard, because in Agile, there is a team member role, right? Everyone is supposed to be contributing in one fashion or not. And usually one of the team members takes on the role as a Scrum Master. So if you're working as a BA and if you also have a Scrum Master certification, then that's a feather in your hat. But if you had a Scrum Master certification but no analysis experience, now where do you fit in that project, right? Yeah. Unless it's a large company where they'll hire a Scrum Master full-time and ask you to manage and maintain 5 projects, there's not much of a role for you, right?
Right.
That is why having a technical skill set like business analysis or testing or development, that is what is critical, and Scrum Master is a nice layer on top. Okay, and PSM is not difficult. I mean, CSM, you go through a two-day course. It's a little bit expensive, but it's well known in the industry. So yeah, I mean, no reason not to take it. But PSM, from the creators of Scrum, Professional Scrum Master, that is a well-respected program as well. And if you're, and it's much less expensive as well. It's only $250 for the exam, and you can learn yourself. You don't have to go into a training school. But CSM, on the other hand, Certified Scrum Master, you will have to invest in a 2-day program, which is at least $1,000, I think. And it's much easier than PSM, actually. So I respect PSM a lot more than CSM, but CSM has done their marketing right. So they have a good amount of, a lot of job descriptions mention CSM as well. And I did PSM first, and then I just wanted to see what CSM was about, and I did that as well. But if you had to pick one, and if budget is your main constraint, then go with PSM. And if not, go with the CSM. And if you can afford it, do it both, because I definitely respect PSM like twice better value than CSM. But again, it's hard to say. Anyways, if you're interested in actually doing PSM later, let me know, and I can give you some tips and resources to get it done as quickly as you possibly can. It's not an easy exam. It's a timed exam. It's a multiple choice. It's some questions are directly from that manual, the PDF that I referred you to. Some are not. So I would say, get into a project, get comfortable, then think about PSM. But if you really think, okay, you're very interested in based on what you're learning and whatnot, I can help you reach there as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Okay.
So
on that, just also, what would you suggest like as a path towards PMP?
Towards PMP. Okay. So for PMP, you need 5 years of. For PMP, you need 5 years of experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
In project management. Now, if you're going BA route, PMP is definitely well-respected, nice to have, but it's not a requirement for a BA position. Once you have a BA position for a few years, then if you want to continue on a managerial path, then PMP is handy.
Okay.
Okay. But if your goal is to get into business analysis and start a job soon, don't let PMP slow you down.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So
Thank
now
you.
so sure. Any other questions? All right. Now I want you all to just review this slide. This should be a recap of what we reviewed. Take a look at this slide and let me know if you have any questions.
Product owner and business analyst.
Mm-hmm.
It says product owner, person who works closely with development team during sprint and acts as final authority representing customer interest.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't that qualify as BA as well?
Interesting question. It does in a certain way. Yes, in the sense that you're the primary one liaising with the product owner, right? Getting their feedback, but the decision lies with whoever is the product owner, whether to have something in the product or not, or what the priority is. We don't define what the priority is. Business does, right? So from that angle, look at the word authority. So who is the one person that can say, you know what, this is important for the product, this is not important for the product? That person would be product owner.
Okay.
Right? So sometimes business analysts can assume that role. Let's say you worked in that company for like 10 years and you know that product in and out and they trust you with the decisions. You could be a product owner.
Okay.
And actually speaking, for a BA, you could logically get into Scrum Master path or the product owner path. Scrum.org has certifications on both angles. Right?
So
But
isn't the Scrum Master role kind of becoming obsolete already?
why would you say that?
The reason why I say that is my husband's company fired all the Scrum Masters last month.
Full-time Scrum Masters?
Yes.
Okay. See, I told you. So you don't have that as your primary focus in your career, right? So it doesn't mean it's obsolete. It just means that they want one of the existing members who's doing some job to assume the role of a Scrum Master. That's
That
all.
is exactly what happened, because a Scrum Master was leading, say, like a team of 8 people. So now there is no longer a Scrum Master. So the team members take up the role of Scrum Master, like every meeting that they have, they just rotate between them.
Sure. Yes. Yeah. That's why having this is a good, nice to have, but it shouldn't be like your primary profession. That's exactly why I said. But doesn't mean it's becoming obsolete, because still someone else is assuming that role, right? So let's say you are a certified BA. Instead of them rotating, you would be the one who is also handling this, right? And that makes more logical sense to me.
Okay.
Correct? So having that certification, having that expertise protects your job pretty much.
Right, and what you say, Tajal, is exactly what my friend said to me last week, and I'm glad I talked to him. When I wanted to take the Scrum Master class, he said, do not waste money on that. And he was talking about business analysis and Scrum Master, and I said, oh, I'm going for Scrum Master class 26 and 27. He says, don't do it. Do business analysis. Anyone can be a Scrum Master within the team.
Exactly. See? Yeah, resounding that opinion multiple ways. Great. And I think that's a good opinion as well. So I would say, I mean, if you have the $1,000, spend it on the 2-day class. If not, focus on the PSM. $250 for the exam. You can learn it yourself. You go through that PDF inside out, and I can give you some resources on where to take some mock tests. And you could very well do it. Like I've helped tons of people without much IT experience or on-the-job experience clear this exam. So if you need any tips to clear it the first time, you can take my help.
Yeah, sure. I would definitely like to give it a shot, even though like it's good. It's a good certification to have with everything else, but it's not something you can 100% like, depend on by itself.
Yep. It's a good ancillary certificate. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, and it looks good on your resume when you show that you're established, and especially for a BA, it's kind of related to what we do, right? Like planning and whatnot. It's not like completely off the charts for us.
Right.
Right. So yeah, PSM, CSM are the 2 certifications. And product owner, more than the certification, I think it's more on that product, more experience on the ground there, right? They simply don't hire a product owner. Oh, we would like you to come and make big decisions for us. No, when does that happen? Right. So you are better off going more Scrum Master route than the product owner route for that reason. And again, to continue that other conversation we had, we are almost a surrogate product owner, so to speak, for that project. So I can see why you guys align. Okay, the BA sounds like the product owner, because sometimes if the product owner is not available, right? And if you want to make like not so difficult decisions, it's not about like priority or whatnot, but you can't get out of the product owner, the sprint has to go on. You might have to make some decisions. If they ask you, okay, option A or option B, you can try to get hold of the product owner. If you can't reach anyone from their team, then the team has to move on, and you might have to make some calls. So in a sense, we perform the role of a surrogate product owner all the time. Make sense?
Yeah, that's an interesting term. So I don't understand, like, why can't a product owner perform the role of a business analyst? Like, what's the need of a business analyst when there is a product owner already there?
Because they already have another day job. Really, that is for the most part. So all they're doing is consulting on your project. They typically will not have the time to come and manage your team and write the detailed requirements and whatnot. So they certainly want an interface so that their time is not, taken away with this one project. They might be supporting like 20 projects, honestly.
I see. Okay.
Okay. And requirements is not their specialty either, right? So to document requirements, it is an art, and it is there is a certain method to it. They may not be equipped or have the know-how to document the requirements, to do the models and whatnot. They are not really built for that. Remember, these are business people, right? they are the ones who call the shots on what the company does in the next 5 years, right?
Right.
Would that person certainly learn business analysis skills so that they can support one project? Probably not.
Right.